Welcome to the Biotech Startups Podcast by Exceeder. Join us as we speak with first-time founders, serial entrepreneurs, and experienced investors about the challenges and triumphs of running a biotech startup, from pre-seed to IPO, with your host, Jon Chee. In our last episode, Ivan Liachko shared his early experiences emigrating to the US, his unexpected path into research, and how navigating academia helped shape his resilience and scientific instincts. If you missed it, be sure to listen to part 1. In part 2, Ivan reflects on the emotional toll of startup leadership, why learning to manage people and egos is just as important as managing experiments, and how frugality and adaptability became superpowers as he transitioned into entrepreneurship. He also shares candid stories about grad school survival, the move to the Pacific Northwest, and the scrappy problem solving that defined his early days at Phase Genomics.
The underlying message is you have to deal with this kind of conflict stuff all the time, and it wears on you mentally. You learn over time the sort of the tricks and tips and what happens when an essential person to the company suddenly quits, right? Like the first time that happened to me, I thought all was over. Like it was, and now, you go through a couple of cycles like that, you kind of get used to it. You're like, okay, it happens, people get jobs, whatever, but that takes time. But you're dealing with these kind of fires all the time. And so you just you get used to them and you learn how to thrive through them. You learn how to turn some of them into successes, so it's just, and it adds to your mental kind of like tapestry of like what you know how to do, right? Like, but going back to this thing about how, in academia, you think you only know how to solve these kind of problems. As soon as you start doing stuff like this, you just learn so much about human interaction. And it's just like day-to-day skills they don't teach you anywhere. You learn them by doing, you learn them just by experiencing and kind of like, this is what happened, this is how we reacted, this is the outcome. And you pick up that super useful experience, I think a lot of it academics actually already have, and they just don't appreciate that they have it.
Spot on. And I think so my kind of like I guess, bio business like interests are like in food and hospitality. And a lot of my friends growing up are in food and hospitality. And the kind of to touch on the kind of the surprise and delight kind of element is kind of like, it's kind of like when you get like when a restaurant kind of F's up the dish and then they just bring out all the goodies. We talk about like, it doesn't have to be in biotech. It's like, just think about a restaurant experience. You're like, oh, this came out, whatever, lukewarm, whatever it probably may be. And then boom, they just bring out like dish on the house, dish on the house, dish on the house. You come back out like, I fucking love that restaurant. Like, and it all stemmed from, oh, my steak was well done. I asked for medium rare and they came out and it blew my mind. And you can apply that.
Right, exactly. Because in essence, all commerce is about human emotions, right? It's rare that we're buying things that we truly, truly need. Most of the time, we're just getting stuff that we want. We have some problems we want to solve. But like so much of it is about emotion and relationship, and so you try to make people happy in different ways. You're going to that restaurant versus this other restaurant, not because the food is necessarily. You're going there based on some qualitative, like emotions and opinions. So learning how to make people happy, how to serve them, it's really what it is. One of the things that's different between academia and industry is that in academia, you're kind of like, you're more focused on yourself and your own stuff, right? Like you're saying, okay, I invented this technology and I'm showing you some data and I'm going to publish it. And then the reviewers on your publication will like comment and be like, we don't like this sucks, whatever. And you're like, well, F you, reviewer number 1, reviewer number 2, reviewer number 3, you're cool. Like, right. But then but you're basically saying like, no, my stuff's great. You're the ones who are wrong. right?
Yeah.
And here's why, type.
Yeah.
But when you're in business the other way around, you have to be like, you'd be like, my opinion means nothing. You have to be like, not nothing,
Yeah.
but you have to be super responsive to what people want. You're making something for them. And if they don't like it, doesn't matter how right you are, right? They say this in
Yes.
sales. Every
That
time
is
you win an argument, you lose the sale, right?
that is
Like,
spot on. That is so spot on. I'm just like, because like sometimes like, when folks, having gone through this gauntlet, right? I think a younger me was like, but I'm fucking right. I know I'm right. But exactly what you said, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because they always remember what they feel. And honestly, most of the decision making is just based on vibes. Like that is like what it like I was like early days hyper quantitative about it, hyper focused on being right. Thought all of this was just rational decision making. Right. And then the longer you do it, you just realize obviously you can't be completely like in on Mars and like, like for example, your science has to be legit. Like you can't just be like snake oiling and selling snake oil off vibes, but perhaps you can, but that's a whole nother thing. But it's just like,
yeah, sure. Some people do quite effectively.
yeah, some people do, but, for the vast majority, it's like, you realize that everyone is just like making decisions off vibes and how they feel. So it's like, you got to swallow your pride, like, and just take it and just like, and just walk away from it, but like make sure that they feel good and remember. And the other point too,
the real pro tip is that you do enough of that and you start loving it because you see the value of it. Every time you think you're right and somebody puts you in your place and you learn from it, eventually you're like, that guy gave me the greatest gift, right? You're like, man, he told me I was wrong and it really sucked. But then I like got over it and I learned that like, actually he was right and I was wrong. And it made me like, you learn to like love it.
yeah, I mean, and that,
wrong.
yeah, and that's the thing too. Like, I think it exactly is. It's like as you get more reps, you start to like embrace more and more embrace it. And I think when you do, you start to see outsized impact for your organization or business. And something too that stood out to me is like, we're talking about folks who go through grad school and are working in the lab, but like I'll even say, like there are plenty of folks who come from non-scientific backgrounds that thrive in science. And, I'll just give you an example. One of our teammates comes from the food industry, and like has been cooking and fine dining like from almost like his whole since high school. Like, and the level of like attention to detail and like there's like basically mise en place like just taking place in our company
Everywhere. Yeah.
everywhere. And this is kind of the thing where it's just like, don't feel like you're tracked because again, all of these skill sets, I think you talked about like the tapestry of life and just like, checking out like all people doing, whether you're an influencer or if you're, a YouTuber or whatever it may be, you're in food, you're in music, all of these skills can be applied to the sciences. So you don't have to have a PhD to be in the sciences. Like there are plenty of roles and important roles to fill that can benefit from a diverse set of interest experiences and learn lessons. But to go back to, you're in the lab, you're at Brandeis. Can you talk a little bit about your undergraduate lab experience and what Brandeis was like for you? What was it kind of a moment where you really got to start to embrace your keen interest in, obviously lab work? Talk a little bit about that experience.
Yeah, totally. So Brandeis was super great. It's a pretty small school with, like a high kind of focus on academics and it's a really good research program. Again, the way I got that lab job, the same. My girlfriend at the time, who is currently my wife, she had some research position in the lab, and I literally just started stalking over there until they let me work there. I just like charmed everybody into like give me a summer job. I was also on my own like financially, so it was rough times. But like I drove the shuttle van like student shuttle van. That was my like occupation.
Yeah.
Um, and then I worked in the lab. So like, yes, so I'd be driving this van,
Yeah.
like coming in like at 2 a.m, like picking
Yeah.
up all the like drunks from the frat
Yeah.
house.
Yeah.
Um, and people will be like, "Oh man, I remember you. You were like my TA or whatever in some class." And I was like, "That's right. I work in science." Like he's like, "That's just my job. This van, that's my art."
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we like but so I did that for some amount of money, and then for whatever it was, $6 an hour or something, and then and then I just worked in the lab doing undergrad research in the lab of Ranjan Sen, who worked on immunology, and we worked on this thing called VDJ recombination, which is how antibodies become so diverse, like how your body can make crazy infinite numbers of antibodies because you have these DNA pieces that can recombine and swap around to make massive combinations of different binding sites. And that's how you get the immune response to new threats. So anyway, so it was super cool research. I started doing everything from like, for those of you who are lab people, like pouring our own northern blots, which nobody does anymore.
Yeah.
Acrylamide everywhere, like old school radiation blots, like
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff. And so, but it was again, it was a lot of it. It was just like you show up in the lab, you're like, listen, I really want to do science. I'm good at it. Can I just do this? And they would let me. And then summer comes, I'm like, dude, I have no money. Like,
Yes.
can you
I
like
need to get
pay
paid.
me?
Yeah.
Can you like pay me a little bit to like I just want to work in the lab and survive. And and I always dreamed like grad school, like a lot of people, when they think about grad school, they're like, man, you're making like no money, you're spending all this time working, whatever. But to me, it was like paradise because I would be like, I can just do the thing I want to do and make enough money to survive. Like that, it's like, yes, when I started grad school, we were getting paid 17 grand a year. Like that was my stipend. But a year before that, I was talking to my counselor and I was like, like guidance, like in undergrad, you get like advisor professors give you advice. And I was like, I don't know how I'm going to afford to go to grad school. I'm going to have to take out loans and stuff like that. And she was like, a lot of people don't realize this, but in life sciences, like you get paid to go to grad school. Like they pay you a stipend. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
I was like, are you kidding me? She was like, it's going to be like nothing. It's going to be like 15 grand a year. And I'm like, I make $6 an hour driving a van at 2 a.m. I'm like 17 grand a year.
Yeah.
Like, oh, like,
Yeah, this is amazing.
This is amazing. So so basically that was that. And so, we were just like scraping by. There was a lot of like survival,
For sure.
The immigrant stuff. You're
For
like,
sure.
you don't appreciate how little people have, they're not just like poor. They're like, like she worked at my girlfriend worked in a restaurant. I was living in this place, like this dorm basically in the summer that had no kitchen. So there was no place to make food. You basically could boil water for ramen and like microwave stuff, nothing else.
Yeah, just like a hot
She was
plate.
working in a restaurant, and I'm like, can you like bring me food people send back? Like it was that level of, she would buy me like employee meals. She would buy me like calzones and stuff.
I know exactly it.
But I'm like, I know somebody like threw out some like lobster ravioli. Like, can you just like bring me it? Like, I don't care. I'll eat whatever. And she was like, no, that's gross. It's nice to have. That's why we have partners.
Yeah. I was going to say it's so funny.
But it was like survival mode. And so then when I find out you're going to make like 17, 20 grand a year in grad school, and I'm like, and all I get to do is work in a lab, and like that's it. That was like, I'm like, what's the catch? Like,
yeah.
They're like, you get to work 70 hours a week in a lab and make minimum wage. And I'm like, that's too good to be true.
Hell yeah. Like, and I get a degree out of this? Like,
I'm like, what are they getting out of this? Right.
Yeah.
So, and so that was me. I was just like lab monkeying as much as I could.
I love that, by the way, because I think there's another element of this that ties, at least where my head is going for entrepreneurship, is that, and I think when you have this level, and so I come from an immigrant family too, so I had like similar experiences. And there's kind of like an element of like, if you know what the minimum you need to survive is, everything feels like gravy like after that.
Yep.
That is a crazy level of like, I think I look back on it of like perspective, that because like when you think about things are like how, you know, you're running your startup, things are getting tough, and you're like, oh, I've seen worse. Like I've seen worse and I was fine. And like I think too, I think about the really frugal days where supportive partners help a lot. But it's like, you know, you're scraping to get by, but I wasn't like unhappy. Like it was a lot of fun. Like, and you survive and you get through it, and you're like, exactly, kind of like when you're thinking about grad school, like they're paying me more and I get to do research and I get a degree. It's kind of, again, it's kind of like expectations, right? It's just like, if you know what that is, like kind of that kind of the minimum that you need to get by, then you kind of just go from there.
When we were starting a company, we were doing budgets and stuff like that. So, you know, I co-founded Phase with a friend of mine, Sean Sullivan, who was amazing software developer from Microsoft. But he basically had to leave Microsoft to do it, and I had to leave my postdoc job. And so he took some absurd pay cut.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is more money than I've ever made.
Ever seen. Yeah.
And we would sit there and I would do these budgets, like, you know, talking to like early investors and funders and stuff, or putting budgets together. I'm like, look, I have kids. You know, my wife is also a postdoc. Like, I don't have like a lawyer or software developer, other significant other. So, but I'm like, my entire salary is basically going to childcare, right? Because like infant care is like half of a normal person's salary.
Yeah.
And I was like, if I can make like 50 grand or more, I think like I can keep it up. And they're all looking at me like, the hell did you just, like, you know, these are all like, everybody, they're like, yes, our CEO, like the numbers were so small compared to what they were, what people, what like the norm, because you're from academia and you're used to being like, if you just feed me, I'll work, right? And then these business people in suits, they're like,
oh my God.
Okay, 50, look where you need.
Like, oh my God. Like, oh my God, I'm kind of concerned. Like, you're just like, like, usually they're like, oh, nice. Like, efficient operations. They're like,
sometimes they're like, you're too hungry, dude.
Yeah, like, maybe like, too efficient. Like, what's like, are you gonna be able to survive?
Like, I don't want you to like die halfway through this.
Yeah. And I think about that experience because it gets woven into your DNA and the org's DNA too, is like how to, because right, like I think there's like the flip of it where you never learn that, and then everything you try to just throw 1,000K or 100K at every problem, without actually questioning like what is it that we actually need. Like, and I'm not saying that you shouldn't, like, I'm not anti-investing capital behind important things, but it's kind of like,
sometimes people don't, they don't, they try to use money to solve problems.
Yes.
And it usually, like, if you don't understand the problem, it's just gonna make it, it's just gonna make it worse, or you're gonna just lose the money.
That's something that I think, I don't know, maybe I'm too opinionated on this point, and I'm probably biased because I have a similar experiences like with this frugality, but like I think people, it's great to be sitting on a boatload of cash. I get it. But like money can also compound problems as much as it can like accelerate success. And I think,
well, and it's also where it comes from, right? Like money is rarely given freely.
Yeah.
So you might be sitting on a boatload of cash, but what's attached to that cash, right?
Yeah.
So like it's better to have a boatload of cash than no boatload of cash. But there's also like this curse of easy money, you know?
Yeah.
It's why people, like, you know, people get in debt, like, because it feels so easy to spend that, but then you just keep borrowing more and more and more because you don't feel the emotional ping. You know, I'll give you an example here. We need an autoclave. You know, my people are like, we got to buy an autoclave. We're starting to do stuff that requires it. For many years, we didn't need one. And And I'm like, cool. Well, there's this paper that says that the Instant Pot makes a perfectly good autoclave. And they were like, what the hell are you talking about? I'm like, we're going to buy an Instant Pot, and that's going to be our autoclave for the time being. And if we need a bigger autoclave, we'll buy a bigger autoclave. And they're like that's how we do like everything. And it's like a joke. It's like an internal joke here. I'm like, we're a company make millions of dollars.
Yeah.
We're buying an Instant Pot. And they're like, no, we got to buy this special thing. I'm like, we're going to buy the Instant Pot. And when we need the big thing, we'll buy the big thing. And guess what? It's been like a long time. We're still using the Instant Pot because turned out that
That's
the Instant
fucking
Pot,
amazing.
Fine. We just got to boil a few bottles here and there. Like
that's amazing.
And it's just stuff like that. Like people want to sometimes it's an act of surrendering sovereignty to somebody else, to be like,
yes,
okay, it's not like we have a problem. I think it does go back to who solves the problems.
Yeah.
We have a problem. If I just say we need to buy a thing, it's no longer my problem. It's no longer my fault. Because then somebody else can say we can't afford it or we buy it. And then if you buy it and the thing doesn't work, whatever, like it's not my fault, right?
Yep.
But you as the leader have to be like, no, we're actually going to solve the problem. And so like the Instant Pot example is like, it's a funny one, but I think it's very true because people immediately just want to buy a thing. And part of why they do it is because they just don't want to deal with the problem sometimes.
Yep.
Right? And you have to be like, no, we're going to sit here and we're going to have an uncomfortable conversation where I go, tell me why an Instant Pot is not enough.
Yeah. That's amazing. And I think that too, because like it's like you can just see it. And this gets to like culture, right? Where it's like that can creep. Like unless you set that kind of like culture up front and have your whole team understand this is how we approach problem solving, you can then, if you don't, let's say you didn't do that. And, being in San Francisco, you just see boatloads of cash just like getting dumped into like AI companies. And look, I'm not an AI expert, so I'm not going to pretend like I can opine on, but it's just like, okay, it's kind of like, let's just start scaling and just throwing money at these kind of problems, like which we believe will solve it. And then it creates these inefficiencies. And then you have like this DeepSeek moment where everyone loses their shit. We're like,
it makes sense for a certain context because, in that particular case, people know that's what it is, right? They're like the VCs who are funding this. They're like, look, we know that 90% of these things are going to flame out, but some of them won't. And so we're deliberately throwing tons of cash at it because we're trying to basically accelerate evolution, right? Some of them are going to fail, some of them are going to succeed, but the potential of success is so much higher than the cost of failure that it makes sense to optimize for speed. Let's just go crazy, right? And yeah, it creates insane inefficiencies, but that's like baked into their formula. When you don't have something like an AI where there's an incredible amount of hype and an incredible amount of potential and incredible, like if you're starting to run like a normal company, what's tempting to do is to see the news about the AI companies and think you're one of them and try to follow that path. That's what kills people. Like if you're going like, guys, we're going to do an AI company. If it works, it's going to make $1 trillion. But there's like a 99% chance it's going to fail. Everybody understands what's going on and they just dump it in and we just build it. Or some people who do these like kind of like pump and dump companies where they're like, we're gonna inject a whole bunch of money, make it look bigger, and then sell it to somebody for like there are business models where that approach makes sense. But if you think I'm going to actually build a company, we're gonna make product, we're gonna sell it, we're gonna grow, we're gonna hire more people, but because the news is dominated by the big players, the big money things, you have a tendency to think that like that's the way you're supposed to do it. And so people who really aren't suited for that model try to get into that, and that's what kills them. Because then you have a boatload of money, but you're making your little products and they're growing at 20% a year, and the investors are like, this needs to be like 2,000% a year.
Yeah.
What are you even doing? And you're like, guys, I'm growing my company 20% a year. It's good growth. And they're like, that's not what the game is.
Yeah.
The game is instant explosion, right? And then that money becomes a curse because right? And you're like, no, I should have been like efficient and slowly growing the whole time. I think it's like mismatched. I think there are times when that approach actually works and is deliberate in its own purpose, but I think people just don't understand which game they're playing.
Yeah,
and
spot on.
that kills them.
Yeah, spot on. Playing different games. Like I think, and you know, I again, I gotta paint this as like these are Jon's opinions, and I'm, you know, I can be wrong, but I get back to like the Michael Dell book that I was just wrapped up reading. Like when Dell was formed, the competitor was Compaq Computers, which was stupidly well funded, and when they were stupidly well funded, they basically were throwing money at their supply chain, like, and they were just had really, really inefficient supply chains because they're like, why not? We have the money to do this. So their cost structure just got bloated. And the reason why no one cares about Compaq anymore and Dell is like what Dell is because he did the frugal thing. He and it was because of the constraint. He didn't have the money. Therefore, he built a better cost structure in the supply chain and then scaled it. Dell was basically bootstrapped, like, which is insane. So like, I think
Insane, right? It's crazy.
It's insane. And I'm like, and like, again, he's a super outlier. That company's a super outlier, had tailwinds. But all that to be said is like, I think knowing the game that you're playing, super important. And also being frugal does not mean slower growth. Like you can actually grow really quickly while being frugal, because if you have more efficient structures, you can just redeploy cash at higher incremental value, like at a higher clip. Whereas the inefficient system, they're redeploying capital at like way less incremental return. So, anyways,
yeah,
all that to be said is
all
possible.
those things happen. There are also cases where people dump lots of money at their supply chains and win, right?
Yeah, totally.
So there's examples of everything. That's kind of what I was saying. Like, it's not like the world is bigger and it's kind of infinite. And just because a thing worked for Dell doesn't mean it's going to work for you. There are plenty of bootstrap companies that go right? Like, it's not like
for sure.
Solution. You just have to like think about what it is you're doing and understand that it's a dynamic system. But I think the problem is like the news cycle.
It's prescriptive.
Forces everyone into the same path, even if it's not for them.
Exactly. It's super prescriptive, which is like what I guess hope anyone out there listening can take away from this is like, these are not like hard and fast rules. There almost are no rules. Like, and being aware that there are no rules kind of is the liberating thing to it. That's the liberating thing. It's like, no. It is possible. Like, you just got to, you know, free yourself of like these confines.
Yeah. And you know, you will talk to one of the other things, I read this somewhere, but it rang so true to me, is that one of the difficult things about entrepreneurship is that you have to look into the face of experts who you respect, who are smarter than you, who have done this before, and say no. Like you have to, because what's going to happen is you have a million people giving you advice, but they all disagree with each other. The advice is different from everyone. And you're the person who makes the final call. And you go like, this person here is super smart. They did this before. They have all this advice. But I'm just going to say, I'm not doing that. Sorry, dude. Like, and it's like, you have to have a little bit of this mental chaos to be like, to say that. Like, you have to be a little crazy to say no, but you have to do it. Like, all these experts will tell you, do this, don't do that. A lot of them will just tell you not to do it at all. And you just have to be like, no, I'm going to be unreasonable, and I'm going to do the unreasonable thing just because I feel like that's what I should be doing. So it's, you know, and then what happens when you fail and you're like, damn it, I should have listened to that guy. But does that mean you listen to him again on the next, you know what I mean? Like, you could keep doing that. Like, there's all these stories of people who are just like failing and not listening and being disobedient and failing again and failing again. Everyone's like, dude, stop doing this. This is crazy. And you're like, no, do it again. You fail one more time. And eventually they're like super successful.
Yeah.
And everyone's like, oh, we knew they were going to be successful the whole time. Like,
I
knew.
No.
They didn't know. Like, Yeah, so it's the no rules thing, I think, is more apropos than it sounds. Like there
Yeah,
really are no rules.
yeah, absolutely.
There's
I
laws,
know that
there's rules, there's legal rules.
yeah. Don't break the law.
There's
Like don't go to.
it's like
I guess the rule is like don't go to jail.
right.
Like
Don't defraud your customers.
yeah. Don't go to jail. That's like probably the main rule. But
For those
like
of you listening, just remember there are rules in the U.S. legal system.
yes, yeah, exactly. So you're now, you're talking about having your kind of guidance counselor be like, hey, like you can get paid for grad school. Like talk about how your selection of grad school and how that shook out.
That one was a little bit more intelligent than my high school because I now, like, I now had like some amount of like there were other people and there was guidance and all the other undergrads are like applying for stuff, right? There was, you take your like GREs and all this kind of stuff. And so, I applied to a bunch of good science schools and I went and the one that I liked the most accepted me, that accepted me, I went to. Like and it was great. So Cornell is where I went for grad school. Also just like a great experience. I got accepted to a few places. Again, like, you're like, there's so many universities out there and like, which ones do I apply to? So you talk to your friends, you talk to people who know, you get some advice from here and there. You put together a packet, you send out, a dozen applications or so, which if you're listening and you're thinking about applying to grad school, that should be your minimum number of applications because people will be like, I'm going to apply to 2 schools and one of them is going to take me. And then you're like, no, it's a lot. There's a lottery thing that happens, right? Like there's like 40,000 schools in the country. And that means there's 40,000 valedictorians and they're all going to be applying to like Harvard and Stanford and stuff. Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like chances are against you. So just like play the numbers, play the lottery. But, there was nothing super controversial about how I did grad school applications. I applied to a bunch of places, got accepted to some, got rejected from many more. And, Cornell accepted me and I went there for a visit and I was like, this is amazing. It's like, this place is so good. It was just like small town, like this is up in upstate New York in Ithaca. Easy living, lots of hippies, like a very lovely kind of agrarian vibe. I called it the Shire. And real estate was cheap. If you get out of town, you can buy a house as a grad student.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. And then pay, $300 a month for heating in the wintertime.
Yeah.
And so,
and did your wife also go to grad school at Cornell?
yeah, so she went with me. So she moved with me when I went to grad school, and she got a technician job in a lab.
Cool.
In the same department. And then after 2 years, she started out as a grad student too. So we were in this program, we were staggered by 2 years. So then I graduated and I stayed in the same lab for a couple of years as, one of these fake postdocs where like don't leave your lab. And then when she finished is when we moved to Seattle for our postdocs.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Biotech Startups Podcast with Ivan Liachko. In part 3, we explore Ivan's graduate research at Cornell, his move into high-throughput genomics at UW, and the discoveries that led to the founding of Phase Genomics. He talks about translating curiosity into commercial opportunity, the importance of scientific collaboration, and how a clever trick in 3D genome mapping became the foundation for an entirely new way to study microbes and viruses. If you're enjoying the series, follow the show, leave us a review, and share it with a friend. See you next time. The Biotech Startups Podcast is produced by Exceeder. Don't want to miss an episode? Search for the Biotech Startups Podcast wherever you get your podcasts and click subscribe. Exceeder provides research labs with equipment leases on founder-friendly terms to support paths to exceptional outcomes. To learn more, visit our website www.exceeder.com. On behalf of the team here at Exceeder, thanks for listening. The Biotech Startups Podcast provides general insights into the life science sector through the experiences of its guests. The use of information on this podcast or materials linked from the podcast is at the user's own risk. The views expressed by the participants are their own and are not the views of Exceeda or sponsors. No reference to any product, service, or company in the podcast is an endorsement by Exceeda or its guests.